Yes, you take that first. There we go. Okay.
I don't know what that was.
Me neither.
Gross.
That's kind of how I feel about today. Awesome, we are live. Hopefully they can hear us. We have our sign that says, "Can you hear me?"
Yes.
Yay! We don't have anyone out yet, so that's helpful.
Just hold this.
Just hold it, it's fine.
Just hold it until we do.
There we go.
And
Then we'll just keep talking.
yeah.
It's gonna be so much fun today. I'm so excited. I was actually really had fun refreshing my brain about all these topics.
Oh yeah. Person!
We have
Hello!
someone! Hi, can you hear us?
Can you hear us? We think that our audio is working, but we are not sure. Hence.
It's the. Oh yeah, we have 4 people.
Okay, people watching, if you can hear us, please let us know. If you cannot hear us, please let us know.
I will double check where it's coming from. Yeah, because we can't end it once it's in there.
Okay.
So hopefully this is the right one.
So if you can hear us, please comment. If you cannot hear us, also comment. Before we start giving you all this fun information, we just want to make sure that you can hear us. Yay! Okay,
Thanks, Dad.
cool, beautiful. All right, so we got 11 people watching, which is pretty great. So I
I'm
think
excited.
we can go ahead and start. But before we do, we have an announcement for you guys. So our Facebook Lives have been super awesome. We've been loving doing them for you these past couple of months, and they've been awesome. But now it's nice outside, and it's warm, and it's sunny. So maybe you guys should go outside instead of watching Facebook Live. So we are going to be cutting down our Facebook Lives over the summer to about 1 or 2 a month. So this is going to be one of the ones for June. We do have one coming in 2 weeks,
I think so.
I believe, as well in June. Then we're going to have 1 in July and 2 in August to encourage you guys to get outside and off your screens. We will have some super fun, interactive, awesome, like get outside, interactive nature activities that we'll be posting up on our social media very soon. And that way you guys can show us how you're engaging with nature and engaging with the zoo, which is going to be super awesome.
Yeah, so watch our Facebook page and our website as well.
So those will be coming up in the next couple weeks, so keep your eyes peeled for those. But today we're going to be talking about reproduction and parenting and eggs, which is a super cool topic, and I love it so much, and it's awesome and amazing. So I'm going to give us the intro on like what on earth even is the egg, what on earth, like how did it even come to be, and where are we today? So today we're going to be talking about different animals that not only give birth but to live young, but also lay eggs. The evolution of how these traits came to be, why we see animals giving birth to live young, why we see animals laying eggs, and why it's beneficial for some animals to do one strategy over the other. So the technical science terms for these, so there's viviparity, which is giving birth to live young, and that's what we do, that's what mammals do.
Most
mammals. Then there's also oviparity, ovum, meaning egg. So animals that lay eggs. Think birds, think lizards, think turtles, think amphibians. So there's viviparous animals that give birth to live young, and oviparous animals that lay eggs.
And a secret one we're going to talk about later.
So, all right. So what on earth came first? Was it the chicken?
Was it the chicken and the egg?
It was the egg! Surprise! Myth is busted forever. Never have anybody ask me that again because it's always the egg. The chicken came later. So, how on earth did this happen? Okay, so, first, there were fish. Alright? So, at one point in time, Earth was a nice, warm, tropical sea, and life originated in the water. And we get our first early primitive fishes. Alright? And so these fish had to find a way to reproduce, and many of the fish species that we see today reproduce in much a same or similar way. You have a spontaneous, simultaneous ejection of ovum and sperm from the male and female that are fertilized outside of the body. Now, these are squishy, jelly-like eggs that are meant to be kept wet. They have to be laid in water. Life had not evolved to come onto land yet, and the hard-shelled egg as we know it, which we'll get to later, did not arise for, give it many millions of years. So fish were laying eggs in the water. Everything was great. Everything was warm. Life was diversifying. They were having a good old time. And then we started to have amphibians kind of come on to the scene. And these were the earliest forms of, true eggs. And these were much like fish eggs. They were jelly-like. They were soft. Amphibians today that lay eggs include things like our frogs and our toads. So this is a life cycle of a frog here, and I don't even know if you can see it, but that little dot behind my finger is a preserved amphibian egg. So these things are super tiny. They're literally coated in a jelly to keep them wet. They have to still be laid in water, even though adult amphibians can live on land. So at this point, when the early egg evolution was starting to kind of get more complex, it still had to be laid in water. It wasn't until about 20 million years later, after we had this evolution of the amphibian egg, that we started to see amniotic eggs. Now, amniotes are a group of animals that include us, so it's mammals, it's reptiles, and birds. And an amniotic egg has a bunch of different characteristics that make it an egg, but think of it like a chicken egg, right? So just imagine when I say amniotic egg, imagine like in your head when you crack a chicken egg, that's what I'm talking about. So, these eggs kind of came around 385 million years ago with the evolution of tetrapods. So as you know, your first four-lobed fishes came onto land, think Tiktaalik and all those weird waddly fish things, right? So now they're on land, and it's thought that they came onto land because there was increased competition in their aquatic ecosystems, and they had to expand into other niches to survive, and the land was a wide open range of opportunity.
The only thing is they were insects, and they even at their largest, insects were not big enough to really compete with larger tetrapods. So.
Exactly. So now these critters are on land. Okay, great, awesome. How do you keep your eggs wet? Because up until now, every single egg that's been laid has been laid in water, and that's what keeps the egg wet. If the egg is not wet, it's going to dry out, and the embryo is going to perish. So we start to see the evolution of the soft-shelled, leathery egg, kind of what you see in modern-day turtles, right? They lay these types of eggs, so they're leathery, they're soft, they're malleable, like you poke them and they'll leave an indent. But these eggs don't really fossilize that great because they're so soft. So the exact time frame in our fossil record of when these leathery, soft-shelled eggs arose is still being debated, but sometime around 385 million years ago. Now this leathery shell allowed those eggs to still stay moist. Now, that was great, and it was working just fine. And 315 million years ago, we started to see groups diverge, diverging specifically into mammals, the synapsids, our earliest mammalian ancestors, reptiles, and birds. Okay?
And there's a differentiation there because we're going to talk about that later.
We'll get to it later. So, this is where we start seeing viviparous, or live-bearing animals in the fossil record. So mammals like us, or our earliest mammal ancestors. Now, the reptiles and the birds kind of started to go a little bit different directions. We still have reptiles today, like those turtles that lay those soft, leathery eggs. But we also started to see, as reptiles evolved into the dinosaurs, we started to see a different kind of egg emerge, and these fossilized really well because they have calcium in their shells. So these are two ostrich eggs. They're freaking huge. But they're hard-shelled eggs. They've got calcium in that eggshell that helps to kind of act as a secondary layer of protection for the embryo inside. These are harder to crack open or to get into than a leathery egg. And these are the kinds of eggs that dinosaurs laid, and these are the kind of eggs that modern birds lay, are these brittle, hard-shelled eggs. Now, that's awesome. This has been a strategy that's worked for a super long time. Obviously, we still have chickens laying eggs, and I mean, they're dinosaurs. Super cool. But this is a strategy that's worked very well. It's persisted for millions and millions of years. Then things got weird with us mammals. We like to get weird. So mammals, there's two groups. There's your placental, well, there's three. There's your placental mammals, which are us. There's your marsupials, which are your kangaroos, which we are not even delving into in this one because they're their own unique little clump.
They're amazing.
And then there's the monotremes, like your echidnas and your platypus. Platypi, platypods, platypodies, I don't know. I don't know what the plural is. But you have your platypuses.
There you go. I like platypuses.
And these guys are egg-laying mammals. So they have extremely, not rudimentary, but in the terms of mammalian evolution and mammalian reproductive strategies, they have one of the earliest forms. So mammals didn't at just one point in time switch from, laying eggs to giving birth to live young. It was a slow and gradual transition that certain groups, went on and certain groups didn't. And the group that didn't move on from this egg-laying trait was the platypus. And that's totally chill, totally fine. It does not mean the platypus is less evolved. It just happens to be a strategy that works super well for its species. But they're super weird, they're super unique. They don't even have mammary glands, they just kind of leak milk.
All over their body, from their skin.
Just from their, the underbelly of their skin, it kind of leaks out through these pores. They're super weird. But this is probably how early mammalian ancestors had their offspring, was through these forms of eggs, and then internal fertilization and internal retaining of the embryo evolved later. Now today we have a bunch of placental mammals, including us, and our ancestors for that evolved about 160 million years ago. So in the span of geologic time, placental mammals are still very young. And it's thought that this has evolved for many reasons. One is that, if you're a female, you kind of become a walking incubator for your eggs. No, you do. You become a walking incubator for your eggs. So, anywhere you go, your babies go with you. So you don't have the risk of, leaving your nest unattended and a predator coming to get your nest. So while it's very energy intensive for the female to, become a walking incubator for, 9 months for us, I think it's 2 years for elephants and a bunch of, variety of spans of time for various placental mammals, the benefits of being able to protect your offspring throughout the entire phase of its development outweigh the costs of doing so. So that's why it's thought placental mammals became a thing or evolved when they did, because the costs of, the benefits of having this internal incubation outweighed the costs of doing so. So none of the strategies that we've talked about so far are better than the other, right? We still have critters laying eggs like this today that are hard-shelled. We still have critters like hairy that lay softer, leathery eggs, which you would expect from most reptiles. We still have the egg-laying monotremes like the platypi and the echidna. So strategies persist everywhere. They're super different, and they all work. So
they all have their ups and downs.
They all have their ups and downs. They all have their costs and their benefits and their trade-offs. But none is a superior strategy to the other, right? Because we have this diversity all over the globe that's still working and still living and still prospering to this day.
Although some human mothers might argue that maybe egg laying would be better. I don't know.
Maybe. All right, but let's talk about this dude right here. This is Harry, or as I lovingly call him, Harold. And he is our ball python here at the zoo. And notice I keep saying he is not a lady, so he's not gonna, lay eggs or anything like that. But his species is super cool. So reptiles in general, they really don't do a lot of parental care for their offspring, meaning that either once the eggs are laid, they don't really care for them that much. So parental care can either be incubating the eggs, right, keeping them warm, keeping them safe until they hatch, and then cool, you're done. Or parental care can include incubating the eggs, keeping the eggs, safe, warm, healthy, including if they're inside the body, and then raising the young after they're born or after they hatch for a period of time to kind of teach them about their environment. These guys are one of the only reptiles that do a form of parental care. And it's actually really cool how they do it. So they'll lay the females. They're a female parental care species, so males really don't do much. So sorry, Gary. But the female will lay her eggs in a clutch, and I'm going to use these ostrich eggs as an example. Pretend that, these are ball python eggs.
They're not that big.
They're not that big. So they'll lay their clutch of eggs, and the female will actually coil herself around the eggs. And these guys are they're constrictors, right? So they're very, very strong. So this is a very delicate act that the female is doing, right? She doesn't want to crush her eggs, but she's got to keep them warm. So she'll wrap around the eggs, make a nice little cocoon around them. And then reptiles are ectothermic, right? They get their body temperature from the outside environment. So how on earth are they going to keep their eggs warm? Because many eggs need to be at a nice warm temperature to properly incubate. And in some species, their sex is determined by the temperature of the eggs. And anyway,
that's going to be a whole nother video.
Anyway, to protect her eggs and to keep them warm and ensure that they're incubating correctly, the female ball pythons will actually cause themselves to shiver. So we shiver involuntarily. It's one of our responses to when we are cold, right? Our body starts to vibrate. If you remember how molecules work in elementary school, the faster molecules vibrate and move, the warmer they get. And that's how we shiver. And that's exactly why the ball python is shivering as well, except she is voluntarily doing so. So this shivering, right, it creates friction on the eggs, it warms her body up, and it keeps the eggs nice and warm. which is something that is super unique and super cool among reptilian species because a lot of them don't even do parental care at all. And yeah, for an ectothermic animal, this is a really cool example of parental care. So hairy species is pretty nifty, even if he's not going to participate in any sort of the care. And that's okay. You're still a good python, and we still love you.
All right, my friends, that was a lot of information, actually about 15 minutes worth. So if you have questions about egg laying or live birth so far, let us know, because I've got a whole other section here about that other third mysterious group that we mentioned earlier.
We haven't talked about it, I don't think.
Yeah, we have. I don't think we have. I don't think we've even alluded to it. I'm excited.
No, all right.
Say bye to Harry.
Live birth, we talked about egg laying. Oviparity, viviparity.
And the reason I get to talk about this is because it's one of my favorite words in the whole world. Okay, so the one thing we haven't talked about yet, it's called ovoviviparity. It's egg and live bearing. Okay, it's so exciting. It's super cool. But the reason there's not a lot known about it, and it's still kind of debated amongst different science papers and different research, is because it doesn't fossilize well. Ovoviviparity is when there is some kind of egg or egg casing or some other kind of casing thing that is kept inside the mother's body for the whole time of development. And then the young actually hatch out of that casing and then are born to the mother. Okay? Now, it looks super similar to viviparity, which is why it's so confusing. And I really appreciate, Chris, you said you were very smart. Some of this we sort of knew, and some of this we had to research, and some of this we had to refresh our brains with. Yeah, lots of notes here. So most of this was stuff I was still researching and trying to figure out and understand. And even 10 minutes before the beginning of the program, I was yelling at the computer because I was really confused. So for the sake of this program, we are defining ovoviviparity different from viviparity, live birth, as ovoviviparity means they get their nutrients from an egg yolk or an egg casing. Viviparity means they get their nutrients directly from the mother, usually by a placenta and or an umbilical cord. Okay, so that's how we're discussing it here. The reason I'm making that differentiation is I was just reading a paper before this program, and it was not talking about ovoviviparity at all, and said it wasn't a thing. So I'm very confused right now. But for the sake of this, we're going to go ahead and go with that definition because that's the most commonly understood part. Okay, now again. Ovoviviparity means that they get their nutrients from an egg sac. I'm going to stand over here so you can't see what Emily's doing because she's going to bring out our next guest. And then viviparity means they get nutrients directly from their mother. Now that we've talked about this really cool third option for having eggs, or babies rather, I'm going to tell you about how it's different. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm blocking the view. I'm going to tell you how it's different across all animals because nearly every type or group, however you want to differentiate between animals, nearly every type has or uses any combination of those three types, whether it's live birth, eggs, or the combination of the two. And that is just what is so cool. And that underscores what Emily was saying about how there's no one right way to do it. Because most groups, oh yay, she's out! I scooped! This is Jenkins, and Jenkins is what we call a red-tailed boa. And I brought her out because she is one of those groups that we know of that is ovoviviparous, meaning that she carries the eggs inside her body. Her eggs, the babies inside those eggs get their nutrients from that egg, and then they hatch, and then they're born. Super cool, super amazing. Love it. Okay? Hi. We'll talk more about snakes here in just a minute. I love her a lot, okay? But, like I said, the cool thing is most groups of animals, however we want to differentiate those, have different, each of these groups uses most of these different kinds of reproduction, okay? So fish, like she said, most of them lay eggs, and that was one of the first ancestral things, but not all of them do. There's a large group of about, I think it was 400 species in, it's not the cichlids, but there's a different group of fish that are live-bearing, and that are often aquarium fish, so people don't even realize that it's these really common fish that are live-bearing in it. However, within that group, because we don't often think of these animals as fish, are the sharks and the rays and the skates. No, I'm not talking about roller skates, although those are very fun. I'm talking about animals that are super ancient, super cool.
Chondrichthyes.
Chondrichthyes. It's one of that's another favorite word. Okay, Amanda, Claire wants to know how many bones the snake has.
Lots.
Ooh, so many. The snake probably has more than we do. Though we don't know for sure. Snakes, we don't know her particular number for sure. We do know the snakes have bones, by the way. Snakes have a skull, 2 jawbones, and then they have their entire body is made of a spine and ribs. So they have tons of bones. Humans have about 205 bones, I think, and she probably has more than we do. Good question, Claire. Okay, so sharks and rays and skates. Skates and rays are those kind of sand dollar looking things.
Pancake.
They're pancakes and they have long tails. They're super cool. And most of those lay eggs. And their eggs are not what you think of a traditional egg like those ostrich eggs. They lay egg sacs that look like bugs, and it's super kind of weird. Some of them are a lot larger, and the nickname for that is actually like mermaid's purse, because they are bigger and they look kind of like a purse. But this is basically the egg of a skate. Shark eggs cases are usually larger, but there would be an embryo in here, and it's sustained. They just lay them, usually near the ocean floor or in a reef or somewhere near there, where they eat or they are fed by the yolk that's in here, and then they hatch out. So super cool casing. It looks like a bug, super weird. But this is the egg-laying fish, the chondrichthyes, the sharks, and the skates and the rays. However, sharks are one of those groups where some of them lay eggs like this, some of them are live-bearing, and some of them are ovoviviparous. They do both, right? And that definition in sharks is that some sharks actually have umbilical cords, so those are the live-bearing. They get their nutrients directly from the mother, and when they're born, they come out, they have a tiny little umbilical cord that shrivels up and goes away, right? But sharks are super cool, sharks are super diverse. That's one example of a group that has all 3 types of modes of reproduction in there. Hi,
Is that
you just having fun?
She's like, I want to give you love.
Okay. Now, frogs and salamanders that we mentioned earlier, those are the kind of the first animals to come on land other than insects. By the way, insects also use all 3 different modes. Not one single species, but different species use different modes. That's something to differentiate as well, that one species is not going to use all 3 different modes because it's an evolutionary trait. It's something that all of the species does or doesn't do. However, across large groups is what I'm talking about when I say they use different modes, just to clarify. Frogs and salamanders, nearly all of them are egg-laying or oviparous, but there's a Suriname toad that they actually discovered as live-bearing a few years ago, and a few different species of salamanders are live-bearing as well. So no ovoviviparity that we know of in those guys, but it's still really cool that they have 2 different modes of reproduction. Okay. Now mammals, as Emily mentioned, we have both live-bearing mammals and egg-laying mammals, and then the really weird therians, which is the kangaroos and other things. Those guys are super fun. They are technically live-bearing, so mammals, which is a pretty small group, but we even have diversity in that group as far as reproduction modes are concerned as well. Now, we have a snake out. We're going to talk about reptiles. And the reason that we made a distinction earlier between birds and reptiles, birds are part of the reptilian group, so are dinosaurs. But they're different in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is their reproductive mode. As far as we know of, because science always changes, but as far as we know, birds is the only living group, birds is the only group that has only one mode of reproduction. Birds lay eggs. Literally every bird lays eggs. They have so many different ways of taking care of them. Some of them lay them in trees. Some of them lay them underground. Some of them lay in a big mound on top of geothermal vents to warm them so they don't have to stay and incubate their eggs. But they do all lay hard-shelled eggs. That's one thing that they all share in common. Over 10,000 species that we know of so far, all of them lay eggs. And the reason I found this so cool is because birds and dinosaurs, by the way. Birds are dinosaurs, birds and dinosaurs. We're going to talk about that in July, because July is dinosaur month. Woo! Sorry. It is exciting. Birds and dinosaurs are part of the group called archosaurs, which is a lower classification from reptiles. Okay, so reptiles is this big overarching group that includes turtles. Still not sure how that works yet, except they're cold-blooded and they have scaly skin. But they have turtles, they have crocodiles, they have birds, they have dinosaurs, they have snakes and lizards, and a couple of tuatars, really cool, weird-looking turtle or lizard-like thing. But archosaurs includes dinosaurs and birds and crocodiles. And the other group, other than turtles, is lepidosaurs. Lepidosaurs. That is the lizards and snakes. Okay? Those two are both reptiles, but they come out reproduction very differently, reproductive modes very differently. Okay? All crocodile species that we know of lay eggs, and most of them have parental care, if not all of them. All birds lay eggs, and as far as we know, again, fossil record doesn't always keep everything complete, but as far as we know, all dinosaurs laid eggs as well, which is so cool. They even cared for them. Many of them have a lot of parental care. So that parental care seems to be very common, and if not almost complete, through archosaurs, which is those birds and dinosaurs and crocodile family. So super cool to think about, super neat to see that evolutionary relationship. Now we're going to talk about snakes and lizards. Snakes and lizards, super diverse, super all over the place. There's oh, my hair's falling out. Cool. So super diverse. Some species give live birth, that viviparity. There's one cool example up here in Montana called the rubber boa. It's super cool. They look like a worm. They are super pretty and super awesome. Those guys will give live birth, as far as we know, right? Many of them are oviparous. In fact, 70% of snakes are oviparous, meaning they lay eggs, including the ball python that you met earlier. And then a smaller percentage are ovoviviparous, like the red-tailed boa Jenny here. She has never laid eggs, and likely will never lay eggs, partly because she's ovoviviparous. She might have eggs inside her body that she then holds on to while they would hatch, and then she would give live birth to them. So super cool, all sorts of really fun things. And we've given you guys a lot of information. I see there's another question in the comments I'm going to talk about. Quinn wants to know how big the snake's eggs are. Good question. So usually with animals, the bigger the animal, the bigger the egg, like our ostrich eggs in the background here. I am not positive how large her eggs are. I would assume they're probably not much larger than her head. So they're probably not golf ball size, right? Probably about golf ball size, although they're usually like kind of oblong shaped. Except again, hers are inside her body. So Harry's eggs, his eggs, particularly the ball python eggs, are probably a little bit smaller. I would say probably a little bit like half, 3/4 golf ball size, maybe half golf ball size. Every snake's eggs are different if they do lay eggs. One cool thing, again, we mentioned earlier that it's not necessarily bad to lay eggs or bad to give live birth. It just depends on the environment that you're in. A few studies that we've looked at, wondering why viviparity would be advantageous versus oviparity, egg laying, live birth versus egg laying, in snakes in particular, is because in the north, our seasons are a lot more volatile, and it's harder to find a consistent place to keep your eggs warm so that they would survive. So not all, but many snakes that are up in the north have either viviparity, which is straight up live birth, like the rubber boa, which again, native to Montana, or they're ovoviviparous, meaning they carry those eggs in their body and then they hatch out as live young. So that might be an advantage for snakes as far as northern hemisphere climates are concerned. It's more beneficial for them to have live birth because that's more likely that their young are to survive. That doesn't mean they take care of their young once they're born, but mom carries them until they're born at least so that they have a better chance of surviving to being able to be born. Does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. Cool. Thank you all for your questions. If there's any others, we'll kind of hang out here and let Jenny here climb around. Jenny is, like we said, a red-tailed boa. We have some pretty awesome snakes around here. She likes to climb, which is why she keeps coming towards me. And she's kind of using both of us as trees at this point. But if you have any more questions, definitely let us know. This was a pretty intense topic and lots of information at you, so definitely ask questions if you have them.
No, you cannot do that.
Don't worry, she's not trying to wrap around her neck, she's just trying to climb higher like she would on a tree. So, if there's any other questions, definitely drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, well, I'll probably give it the next minute and a half. We'll just kind of stand here and talk about our lovely little snakes here. We do have several different kinds of snakes here at ZooMontana, and oftentimes the mode of reproduction, I can't get that word out, mode of reproduction often follows family groups. So many boas are ovoviviparous. They have eggs inside the body and then live birth. Many pythons are egg laying. So it's pretty common within the families to be similar. Oh, thank you, Chris. That was very nice of you. We're glad you enjoyed it. Oh, Quinn wants to know how strong her grip is.
She's very strong.
She's very strong.
It like takes effort to like hold her out and push her away. She's like 15 pounds of just pure muscle.
Yeah. So we don't have a number on that, but snakes do use, this snake in particular, does use her body to constrict her food. A common myth about the constrictor snakes is that they suffocate their food. In fact, scientists were realizing that they were dying way too quickly for it to be suffocation. Suffocation's really slow. Not great for anybody involved, because then the animal that's eating the animal has more likelihood to be injured, and the animal dying is just having a really awful time in general. What they discovered was when they're squeezing their prey and constricting it, what they're actually doing is creating a difference in blood pressure and like stopping blood flow and actually inducing a heart attack, basically, which makes sure that, it makes the animal go quickly. Also helps them be less prone to injury. Anyway, that was an off topic. They can squeeze really, really hard. They're strong, but we don't really know how. I don't have a number on how strong she is. Again, she is all muscle. She's got lots of muscle. She's 15 pounds. She could hurt Emily if she wanted to, but she's not trying to do that. She's trying to climb up her because, again, she's like a tree. If she did squeeze her, it was because she's trying to get a grip and go higher. It's not because she's trying to hurt her. We are way too big for her to eat. Good question, Quinn. Thank you.
All right, Jen.
That's okay. She gets fed later today, so we're good. All right, my friends. Thank you so much for watching us through this pretty intense and kind of heavy topic, just because there's a lot of information to absorb. But we really appreciate you watching. Our next one, we will post it on Facebook, because I don't remember when the next one is. I think it's in 2 weeks.
17th, I want to say.
Something like that. We'll let you know. We'll post it in the comments. That way you'll know where it's supposed to be.
And every Wednesday, if you guys haven't noticed, for those of you who are following us regularly on Facebook, every Wednesday at noon, we do announce the topic and the time of the next Facebook Live. So even though there might not be one next week, keep your eyes out on Wednesday for those posts going out at noon, because they detail the topic and when and where and what and all that. And those will still go out on Wednesdays before the events.
Perfect. Oh, and Claire wants to know how they climb. Good question, Claire. So part of that is their muscles, and part of that is the specialized scales that they have on their belly. So their belly scales are horizontal, like this, instead of this little interlocking kind of teardrop-looking shapes. Their belly scales kind of stretch a little bit. They have lots of muscles, so they can use their scales to grip the surface and kind of move themselves along, kind of like that. So most trees, as you've probably felt on the outside, are pretty rough, right? And that allows a lot of places for those scales to be able to kind of grip as they go up a tree. It's not an easy process for them by any means. In fact, a snake this large would probably not spend a lot of time up in trees just because of the potential to fall and get hurt. But especially baby snakes do spend a lot of time up in trees, or smaller snakes. We have racers here in Montana that do spend time up in trees. I saw one last summer. It was super cool. But mostly it's just their muscles and the ability of their scales to kind of move for them to climb up. Good question, Claire. All right, my friends. If you do have more questions, you can definitely pop it in our chat over here, and we'll be watching that for the rest of the day, kind of figuring out and answering more questions. Thank you guys again for watching today. Hope you enjoyed it, learned something or several cool things. We relearn things / learn new things whenever we do these things. So definitely, also, if you have, if you're interested more in this topic, PBS Eons is a really cool organization. They've got tons of videos, both on their website or on YouTube. We learned a lot for this one. It was kind of our inspiration for this one from their show, How the Egg Came First. They're like 5 to 10 minute long videos. They're super digestible for pretty much any age. They're super fun to look at, and they have hundreds of them at this point. So definitely check them out. They're cool science-based videos. And yeah, thanks for watching. And thank you, Quinn and Claire, for so many awesome questions. We really appreciate that. All right, my friends, thank you so much. Have a great Saturday, and even if it's raining outside, I hope you do enjoy your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye, everybody.